Althea Vance missed her flight by 3 minutes and stood there in the airport parking lot staring at the sliding doors like they had personally betrayed her suitcase beside her phone still silent, and the silence was the cruelest part because 3 days ago her mother vanished without a goodbye, and the police spoke in polite circles while her house felt like a museum of unfinished conversations. And now even the investors wouldn't wait, so she had paced the curb breathing through panic when she saw her, young, striking even through exhaustion, sitting on a concrete barrier with a baby bundled too thin for the cold, a woman whose eyes weren't begging so much as bracing, like she'd already learned the world doesn't care, and Althea should have kept walking but couldn't, because the image stabbed too close to the fear she wouldn't say out loud, that her own mother might be sitting somewhere just like that, invisible to everyone rushing by. So Althea approached, asked if she had a place to stay, heard the soft, practiced lie, "We'll manage," and before logic could catch up, Althea pressed a card into her hand instead of keys, her personal assistant's number, a hotel voucher, a prepaid debit card, a promise that felt safer than giving a stranger a house, and the woman introduced herself as Sienna. The baby is Leo, and something in her voice sounded educated, ashamed of needing help, which made Althea's throat tighten, so she told her driver to take them to a warm hotel near the lake road. "I have a small place there. I'll arrange something soon." And then Althea ran inside to rebook, but the rebooked flight triggered new chaos, because within an hour the airline rerouted her and the investors moved the meeting to a different city the next morning, and while Elias buried himself in logistics, Althea did what she hadn't allowed herself to do since her mother disappeared. She stopped, sat, and listened to the ache under all her competence. And when her phone finally rang, she snatched it like a lifeline, expecting Martha or the detective, but instead a calm male voice said, "Ms. Vance? This is Silas Grange. I've got something. It's not a lead. It's a person." And he explained that a woman matching Beatrice's description had been seen at a roadside diner 2 towns out at dawn on the day she vanished, confused and insisting she had to go to the lake, which made Althea's chest tighten because the lake house had been her father's favorite place, the one her mother used to love before grief turned memories into knives. And Silas said, "I'm checking cameras now, but if she's moving toward that area, the window is closing." And Althea didn't think. She grabbed her coat, told Elias to handle investors without her, and drove the highway with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, repeating in her mind every ugly sentence she'd thrown at her mother, every time she chose work over warmth, every moment she thought control could replace love. And the closer she got to the lake, the more the world looked like it was holding its breath for whatever she would find. She found not tragedy but a puzzle. Her lake house looked different from the road, not abandoned, not broken into, but tended, with a garden edged neatly and smoke rising from the chimney as if someone had lit the place like a signal. And she pulled in too fast, nearly clipping the gate, ran up the porch steps, and froze because the front door was open a crack, and from inside came laughter. Not the laughter of a party, but the soft laugh of someone who finally felt safe. And Althea stepped in and saw her mother standing at the kitchen counter stirring soup as if she'd been doing it forever, her hair pinned up, her back straight, wearing one of Althea's old sweaters from years ago, and for one glorious second Althea's heart exploded with relief, until Beatrice turned, looked directly at her, and the eyes that were supposed to recognize her instead showed only mild surprise, the way you look at a stranger who's entered the wrong home. And Beatrice said gently, "Oh, hello. Are you lost?" And Althea's knees almost folded, because the body can't decide whether to collapse from joy or grief when both arrive at once. And then from the hallway came Sienna, the homeless woman from the airport, carrying Leo on her hip, her face brightening when she saw Althea as if seeing a rescuer return, and she said, "You're here. Thank God. She's okay." And Althea could barely speak. She could only point with a trembling finger at her mother and whisper, That's my mother." And the room went still, even the baby quieting as if sensing the weight of that sentence. Sienna sat Althea at the table and explained through shaking breaths that she never went to the hotel, that on the drive her baby spiked a fever, and she begged Dante to stop at the nearest clinic, that she waited outside with Leo while the driver went inside, And that's when Beatrice appeared on the roadside in the early morning fog, disoriented, clutching nothing but a handkerchief, repeating one thing over and over. Langston will be worried. I have to get to the lake. And Sienna, terrified to leave an old woman alone, asked where she lived, and Beatrice, with complete certainty, gave the lake house address, and Sienna thought it was fate or coincidence or a miracle, so she asked Dante to bring them there, and when Beatrice walked into the house, she collapsed into tears and kept whispering her husband's name as if the past had become the only safe place left, and Sienna said, I planned to call you, I swear I did, but I didn't have your number yet, and then your assistant's card, it got wet in the rain and the ink bled, and I couldn't read it, and I thought I'd find a way back to the airport to ask, but the baby got sick again, and then the storm came, and the roads. And Althea wanted to be angry because 6 months of searching lived like a scar on her chest, but she looked at Beatrice feeding a spoonful of soup to Leo, smiling with a softness Althea hadn't seen in years, and anger died in her throat because the truth was brutal and simple. Sienna didn't steal her mother, Sienna saved her. But this alternate truth had a darker edge, because over the next hour Althea pieced together what the police missed. Her mother hadn't run away to punish her. She'd wandered after a silent mini-stroke, the kind that doesn't always look dramatic, the kind that steals direction before it steals speech, and in a cruel twist of fate, the one place her mother's damaged mind could still find was the place her heart remembered, Langston's lake house, while the city, with its traffic and cameras and indifferent strangers, offered nothing but noise and dead ends. And when Silas Grange arrived later that evening, called by Althea in tears, he confirmed it by pulling a rural traffic camera clip that showed Beatrice walking along the shoulder at dawn with a vacant steadiness, and he said quietly, she didn't disappear. She escaped the city and followed memory, and Althea's guilt turned into something heavier than guilt, regret sharpened by clarity, because she realized her mother hadn't left her out of spite. Her mother had left because she couldn't stay anchored in a home that had become a battlefield, and Althea had been so obsessed with being right, with proving her pain, that she forgot the simplest thing. Old hearts break easier, and sometimes they don't heal the same way again. That night, instead of rushing back to investors, Althea did what she'd never allowed herself to do. She chose people over profit, and she called Elias and said, tell them the deal will wait. My mother won't. And Elias argued at first, then heard the tremble in her voice and went silent, and Althea stayed at the lake house, sleeping on the couch like a child afraid her mother might vanish if she closed her eyes, and the next morning she brought a neurologist from the city, and the doctor examined Beatrice, asked her the date, asked her who the president was, asked her who Althea was, and Beatrice smiled politely at Althea and said, this lovely woman seems very worried about me. And Althea's throat burned, and the doctor took Althea aside and said the words that sounded like both relief and heartbreak, likely a TA. It can affect memory and navigation. She may recover some recognition. She may not. But she needs routine, safety, and emotional calm. And Althea nodded as if she could bargain with the universe by obeying instructions perfectly, and she began building that calm with desperate devotion, pinning old photographs on the wall, cooking the foods her mother used to love, playing her father's favorite jazz at low volume, telling Beatrice stories without forcing her to remember, and slowly, like winter ice cracking in spring, Beatrice began to show flickers of knowing. She touched Althea's cheek once and said, your eyes look like mine, and Althea nearly collapsed from the weight of hope. Meanwhile, Sienna's story unfolded differently too, because in this version Richard wasn't just a cruel husband, he was a man with money and reach, and within 2 weeks he started calling local shelters, clinics, and county offices asking questions, and one night a black SUV rolled slowly past the lake road like a shark circling, and Sienna saw it through the curtains and went pale, whispering, he found me. And Althea felt a cold fury settle in her bones, the kind she usually reserved for hostile competitors, and she did what she did best. She built a wall of strategy around a vulnerable person. She called her company's legal team, filed a restraining order, helped Sienna report the abuse, arranged for safe housing through a women's advocacy group, and when Richard's lawyer sent threats, Althea answered with documents, witnesses, and cameras, because rich bullies thrive on silence. And Althea had lived too long in silence already, and she refused to let another woman be erased by it. So Sienna didn't stay hidden in fear anymore. She stepped into protection and process, and for the first time, she looked like a person returning to her own life instead of a shadow surviving someone else's. The final turn of this alternate story wasn't the family moves into one big house ending. It was messier, more human, and in a strange way more powerful, because Althea realized she couldn't replace 30 lost years with one grand rescue. She couldn't buy back time with generosity, but she could choose what kind of woman she would be now, and she made 3 decisions that rewrote her future. First, she suspended the investor deal until her company could proceed without her constant presence, appointing Elias as interim lead and training a real leadership team so the business no longer depended on one exhausted woman. Second, she moved her mother into a small, calm apartment attached to the lake house caretaker's cottage, close enough to see Althea daily but quiet enough to keep Beatrice steady, and she hired a memory care nurse not because she was wealthy, but because she finally accepted that love isn't only emotion, it's responsibility without resentment. And third, she helped Sienna build independence instead of dependence, funding her certification renewal, getting her a stable accounting position in a neighboring town under a protected address, and celebrating the day Sienna signed a lease in her own name like it was a wedding, because freedom is the kind of miracle that doesn't sparkle. It simply holds. Months later, on a late afternoon when the sun turned the lake into copper, Althea sat with her mother on the veranda while Leo chased ducks at the edge of the water, and Beatrice watched him and laughed, then suddenly turned to Althea with a furrowed brow as if a door in her mind had cracked open, and she said softly, "I know you used to braid your hair too tight when you were angry," and Althea's breath caught, tears bursting before she could hide them, and Beatrice reached for her hand and said, "I'm sorry if I made you feel like love had conditions." And in that moment Althea understood the real ending wasn't the deal, wasn't the house, wasn't even the miracle of finding her mother. It was the quiet, terrifying courage of letting a family heal without rewriting the past, and as the sky darkened, Althea squeezed her mother's hand and whispered, "We can start from here." And Beatrice, not fully remembering but fully present, squeezed back like a promise, "And if you stayed until this part, I want you to do 2 things for me right now. Hit like, so this story reaches someone who needs hope. Subscribe for more real-life stories that hit the heart, and comment the city you're watching from, because I read every comment and I want to know how far this little family traveled to reach you.